Ben and Anna search for a box buried under an old oak tree, Kate's favorite spot in the park. Inside the box, they find a journal filled with Kate's memories and a heartfelt letter to Ben. The letter encourages him to let go of his grief, accept help, and embrace life again. Deeply moved, Ben realizes how much he needed Kate's words. As they leave the park, lighter and closer than before, Anna reassures Ben that Kate would be proud of him. The familiar chime of the bell above the shop door greeted Anna as she stepped inside, the scent of lavender and aged wood wrapping around her like an old friend. It was early morning the next day, and the soft amber light of the sun slanted through the lace curtains, casting delicate patterns on the hardwood floor. Her hands brushed against the fabric on the counter, a soft organza for a little girl's birthday dress. The shop had always felt alive to Anna, each spool of thread and rack of garments whispering the stories they held. But today, it felt heavier, like the shop itself shared her unspoken burden. Kate's message lingered in her mind like a half-remembered melody. You don't always have to be strong alone. It echoed in Ben's words too, the way he admitted he needed to hear those exact words that day. Anna had smiled for him, offered reassurance, but now that she was alone, the walls felt too close, her breaths uneven. She pressed her palm against the counter, her mind drifting to memories of her mother bustling around the shop. She could almost hear her voice. A dress isn't just fabric, Anna. It's hope. A girl sees herself as beautiful. A bride takes her first steps into a new life. A widow remembers that she can still shine. We don't just sew stitches, we mend souls. Anna swallowed hard. Her mother's voice had always been her compass, especially after she'd passed. This shop wasn't just four walls. It was a legacy, a lifeline between her past and present. But lately, it felt like it was slipping through her fingers. She glanced at the ledger tucked beneath the counter. The numbers stared back at her, cold and unfeeling, a stark contrast to the warmth of the shop. She hated looking at them because they only told one story, one she wasn't ready to admit. The bills were piling up. Supplies were costing more. And though her clients adored her work, many could barely afford her services. Anna had never had the heart to charge what her creations were worth. Her throat tightened as she thought of Maya earlier this week, standing in the shop in her hand-sewn prom gown. The young girl had twirled in front of the mirror, her laughter ringing out like a melody. Anna had stitched every seam with care, knowing how much this night meant to her. Maya had helped too, her eager hands pinning fabric and threading needles under Anna's patient guidance. I want to learn, Maya had said, her eyes sparkling with determination, so I can make my own someday. Anna had smiled at her, seeing a bit of herself in the girl's excitement. They had worked side by side, and by the end, Maya's joy was as much about the process as it was about the finished gown. Her eyes had shone with happiness, the kind Anna had hoped to give her when she agreed to take on the project, despite knowing the family's financial struggles. Later that evening, Maya's mother had come by. She'd stood at the counter with trembling hands and tear-filled eyes, her gratitude spilling out in broken whispers. "Thank you," she had said, her voice thick with emotion. "You've made her feel so beautiful, so special. I don't know how to repay you." Anna had waved her off gently, reassuring her that it was enough to see Maya's joy. But the woman had gripped her hand tightly and promised through her tears, "I will repay you, Anna. I swear I will." The memory lingered, both warm and bittersweet. It wasn't about the money. It never had been. But love didn't pay the electricity bill. And as much as Anna wanted to believe in promises and gratitude, she couldn't ignore the mounting pressure that weighed her down like an invisible anchor. "Mama, do I have to let go?" she whispered to the empty shop. Her voice trembled as she said it aloud, the weight of the question pressing against her chest. She sank onto the old stool by the counter and pulled open the bottom drawer. Inside was a faded photograph of her mother and herself, taken on the shop's opening day. Anna had been only 7, her hands gripping a little dress they'd made together. Her mother had her arm around Anna, her smile wide and full of pride. The memory of that day came rushing back. The smell of fresh paint, her mother's laugh as they celebrated with lemon tarts, and Anna's beaming pride when her mother said, "This dress will make someone feel special. You made that happen, Anna." Her fingers tightened around the photograph as tears pricked her eyes. She wanted to believe her mother would understand, but the thought of letting the shop go felt like failing her, like losing a piece of her own heart. Yet deep down, Anna knew she couldn't keep this up forever. She was one person carrying the weight of a dream that had grown too big to bear alone. The love she had for the shop didn't make the burden any lighter. As Anna tidied the counter, stacking spools of thread and straightening a pile of neatly folded fabric, her thoughts lingered on the weight of the day. Her mother's photograph still sat tucked in the drawer, a quiet reminder of what she was holding on to and how much of it felt like it was slipping away. She sighed, moving to her sewing machine and pressing the pedal. The rhythmic hum filled the shop, grounding her as she focused on a few leftover stitches from an earlier project. Her hands worked automatically, but her mind wandered to Kate's words in the park, and Ben, his quiet, unexpected vulnerability. The bell above the door chimed, breaking through her thoughts. She glanced up and froze. It was Ben. He stood in the doorway, the soft morning light spilling in behind him, illuminating his figure. But it wasn't just the fact that he was there. It was the smile on his face. Ben never smiled, at least not like this. Every other time he'd walked into the shop, he'd carried a sort of quiet intensity, a weight that made him seem untouchable. But now, his lips curved into a warm, easy smile that softened the edges of his face, reaching his eyes with a glimmer of something lighter. Anna blinked, her heart skipping a beat as an unwelcome thought barged into her mind, loud and clear. He's handsome. Her eyes widened, and she immediately looked back down at her sewing, her cheeks burning. Where did that come from? She adjusted the fabric, pretending to focus on the thread as her brain spiraled. It's just a smile, Anna. A smile. Why does it suddenly feel like my thoughts are shouting? She bit her lip, mortified, even though she knew there was no way he could hear her ridiculous inner monologue. Ben approached the counter, his boots tapping softly against the wooden floor. He tilted his head slightly, studying her with a curious look. Everything all right? Yes, she said quickly, her voice a bit too bright. She cleared her throat, scrambling to sound normal. Yes, fine, great, just, focused. She gestured vaguely at her machine. Ben's brow quirked slightly, but the faint smile on his lips didn't falter. I wasn't sure if now was a good time. It's a shop, Anna, she thought wryly. Of course now is a good time. She resisted the urge to roll her eyes at herself, and instead gave him a crooked smile. Well, the crowds have been overwhelming today, she said dryly, gesturing around the very empty shop. But I think I can squeeze you in, wheeze you. Ben chuckled softly. the sound low and rich. "That's good to know," he said. He hesitated for just a second, slipping his hands into his pockets before speaking again. "I was wondering if you'd like to have dinner with me tonight," he said, his tone confident but warm. Anna blinked, her sarcasm suddenly evaporating. "If you're free, of course," he added smoothly, the faintest hint of something softer in his eyes. She glanced at the fabric-strewn counter, lifting a stray spool of thread in mock seriousness. "Oh, well, as you can see, I'm absolutely drowning in work," she said, deadpan. "I barely have time to breathe." Ben's lips twitched, his smile widening slightly. Anna sighed dramatically, setting the thread down. "But," she said, a warm smile breaking through her teasing, "I think I can make an exception." 7 o'clock, he asked, his tone casual but with an undeniable glimmer of satisfaction. "7 works," Anna replied, nodding. He lingered for a moment, his gaze holding hers, before turning to leave. The bell chimed softly as he stepped out into the morning light, the door clicking shut behind him. As the shop fell quiet again, Anna sank into her seat at the sewing machine, her thoughts swirling. What just happened? She thought, pressing her lips together to stifle the grin tugging at her mouth. Her cheeks were still warm, and that stupid, traitorous thought, "He's handsome," refused to leave her alone. She buried her face in her hands for a moment, groaning softly to herself. "Get it together," she muttered, though a small, giddy laugh escaped anyway. Even as she tried to refocus on her work, she couldn't shake the way his smile had felt like sunlight breaking through clouds.